Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech haolam,
asher kitshanu
v'kirshanu
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu
la'asok
la'asok b'divrei
b'divrei
Torah.
Torah. Amen.
Amen. So I wanted to start with um, the pagan roots of Purim that a lot of historians now believe. And when I read it, it makes sense to me. So but if you're Persian, if you're a Persian Jew, you would absolutely dispute this because this story took place in Persia, which is Iran today. Jews have been in Persia. How long do you think Jews have been in Persia?
Since time began,
Well, that's a little, but like, give me like a
for
number of what you think.
a long time.
A long time is true.
I don't know a date, but they've
I
been
don't know,
going
Dave, but
through.
give me a year, a century, a, a millennium.
After the first temple was destroyed.
Yes. After the first temple was destroyed, which was 586 BCE. So that's 2,500 years ago or 2,600 years ago. Um, Jews went to Babylonia, which is Iraq, and then Babylonia was conquered by Persia. And the Cyrus the Great allowed a lot of Jews to return back to Judea, as it was called at that time. And they rebuilt the second temple, but some of them, I'm sure, were trading, and we believe that that's when Jews started moving to Persia and trading with Persia and going to Persia. So Jews have been in Persia for 2,500 years. They are completely, I mean, we don't appreciate this, enmeshed in Persian culture. 586 BCE is 1,200 years before Islam started.
Mm.
Islam was in 700 CE or AD. I mean, they were there when there was just pagans and they were the Jews, and their culture is so enmeshed, their language, everything, that imagine the shock when they all had to leave, or so many of them had to leave, in 1970, in the 1970s, after thousands of years, hundreds of years of being in Persia. So Persian Jews will tell you that this story didn't happen, and they say there's a grave of Esther in Persia that you can visit. So there's that point of view as well. But we're going to look at this when we look at the story, and we're going to read the story too, and we're going to see kind of the discrepancies and the kind of it's very humorous. Perhaps it was a satire. Perhaps it was a social satire on life for Jews in Persia at the time. Not a literal event, but a social satire. And sometimes social satires really tell you the truth of a situation, but it's a safe way to do it without actually stating it. But first, we're going to look at the actual points of view. So I'm going to start with this, the pagan roots of Oops, Miriam's coming in. I got to let her in. Whoops. What happened there? Admit. Okay. So, who would like to read? Rebecca, why don't you start?
Purim and its pagan roots. According to many modern Bible scholars, the festival of Purim did not have its source in the story told in the book of Esther. According to Haim Shas, Purim originally appeared among the Persian Jews and was adopted by them from their non-Jewish neighbors. The
Okay.
Jews,
Go
the
ahead.
Jews, the Jews of Persia observed, along with their neighbors, an annual festival that was celebrated in the middle of the last of the winter months. From the beginning, it had the characteristics of a spring masquerade and was a festival of merriment, play, and pranks. A very popular festival with both Persian and the Babylonian Jewry, it was eventually spread to Palestine.
Okay. By the way, this comes from like a very secular source, and it wasn't called Palestine then, it was called Judea. I'm just saying that the name was not Palestine, that in 400 BCE, it was Judea. Okay. So Merle, why don't you read? Then we're going to talk about it. Theodore Gaster.
Theodore Gaster presents several theories for the origin of Purim in his volume Festivals of the Jewish Year. In one theory, Purim is asserted to date back to the Babylonian New Year festival. On this day, the gods were believed to determine the fate of men by lot, and Babylonian world for lot was Peru.
Right. And Purim is the Hebrew word for lots. Puru,
Oh,
Babylonian word is Puru, and the Hebrew word is Pur, and Purim is the plural of a lottery or lots. So it's a very similar word. Okay, a little more.
It was also postulated that the festival was characterized by a ritual pantomime that portrayed the conquest of Babylonian gods over those of its neighbors. The problem with this theory is that the Babylonian New Year festival fell in Nisan, not in Adar, and it lasted for 10 or 11 days.
Okay. So what are the similarities to the Babylonian festival and Purim? What are the similarities? Dress up in costume, pranks, or cross-dressing, lottery, big drinking. All of these are similar to the Purim holiday. And Babylon, it's interesting, so weird to me that European countries and now even Israel celebrates Halloween.
Oh,
Yeah, they celebrate Halloween. It's a holiday that started here, and I think it started basically from the Mexican Day of the Dead, and then Halloween was the day before, All Hallows Eve, and then it became this thing, and suddenly it spread because it's very popular. So it's very possible if there's a popular holiday in Babylonia where a lot of Jews live, Babylonia being Iraq, that also went to Judea. Oh my God, this is so great. And what's really weird? Now, in the Jewish community, we're starting to celebrate Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year. Temples are starting to celebrate it a little bit, and that's the Persian New Year. And we're talking about doing Mamuna, which is, does anybody know what Mamuna is? Panina, do you know what it is? Wait, you're muted, Panina. Oh,
isn't it the holiday that they put paint on their hands and something?
No, that's a different one. But Cindy, what's Mamuna?
Is it the last day of Passover?
no.
Right.
Oh.
It's at night. Susan, I think it's at
Yes.
night, and it's a big party. And all the people,
Yeah.
especially those of from North Africa, especially those from Morocco,
Morocco.
The ones who
they
celebrate
cook,
Ramadan,
they make-
that's what they do at night. They do
Okay.
the Mamuna.
Wait,
They
one
eat
person
they
at a
make
time.
festival.
One person at a time.
excuse me, they make pastries like you have never eaten before, like the fanciest pastries you could ever eat. And so many families do it, and they put it out for the public in general, and people walk in the streets and visit these homes. They're all welcome. They partake of the food, and it's a general huge party that lasts early into the morning, 12 o'clock, 1 a.m.
Right. And the main point of it is it's after you've been you've eaten only matzah for the whole
Right.
8 days. So it's like the end of Pesach. It's basically a huge carb fest. It's just a big explosion of,
That's true.
let's eat all the stuff we haven't eaten. And I was told that in the Persian Jewish community, it's a tradition to announce engagement of wedding engagements of young people at Mamuna. It's they sometimes do that. But we see how cross-cultural holidays that are fun and lively and engaging and social and with food can cross into different cultures. So it can be I'm going to call you in a minute, Panina. It's very possible that Babylonian New Year, Jews celebrated Babylonian New Year, just like we're now starting to celebrate Persian New Year. I mean, just because they're here and they want to do it. And we go, sure, I'll come to a Persian New Year party. And it starts to become part of the culture. Yes, Penina.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're looking at it now that it's in a part of the Bible. So we have to see now why is it there, because otherwise we wouldn't know about it, I think. So the thing is this, there is two things here. First of all, Esther and Mordechai were supposed to be descended of the line of King David. So there is the situation where a part of the dynasty of Israel is now in Persia. It's not just the regular people. That's why she kept secret her identity.
Right, but we're not doing the story yet, and we are going to go
I'm not.
deep
I
into the
know.
story. We're
Okay.
now looking
I
at
know the origins, but I'm returning to the point. Why is it in the Bible?
yes.
I think there is a point. First of all, they say that they try to make it light by the amount of parties, drinking parties that were going on there
Right.
at the thing, to show you that you couldn't really depend on the surroundings.
I know, we're going to look at the text
right
after this.
Second, okay. So if that's what, then I'll wait. It's okay.
No, yeah, we're going to go into the text, and then it would be great to look at, analyze.
Right. Like I said, to start with, you're looking how many parties there were, how many drinking parties are there.
We're going to
This
look
is
at
already
all
a beginning. Yeah.
We're going to look at all of that, but right now,
okay.
and you know what? It could be a very important text. It has a lot of really important messages.
Very.
But it was created as a commentary on society, or did it really happen? Wait, Rebecca, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. So let's just read this part. Then we're going to the text. We're spending the next like 2 months on this. We're going to go really deep into it because you're really right. But I wanted to sort of share what's, some points of view about it, and then we can decide ourselves. Hold on, what's this? Why is this thing in here? Okay. Whether we think, oh, I think it happened, or I'm not sure. Okay, here's another theory. Cindy.
Another theory starts from the fact that both the ancient Greek version of the Bible and the historian Josephus call the festival not Purim, but Ferdea, which is contended to be a distortion of the old Persian Farwad.
Whatever, yeah.
A feast held toward the end of the month of March. The fact is, however, that the feast of Farwaddigin lasted at least 5 days and was primarily a commemoration of the dead.
So, I have to say, even though it's not the exact time or the exact days, to me, doesn't necessarily negate the influence of Babylonian New Year or pagan festival. I'm just saying, this author that I found it from, well, can't be because it was in April, not March. But whatever. Go ahead. I don't think that can negate it. Continue, Cindy.
A third theory connects the name Purim with the Hebrew word pura, winepress, and assumes that the festival arose in the Greek period as an adaptation of the Greek festival of Pythagogia, or opening the wine cask. Again, this theory has its problems. The opening of wine casks occurs in the fall rather than in the spring.
Okay, that one I can see saying, though. Okay, who else would like to? Tina, why don't you read?
Where are we now? Gaster?
Right here, yeah.
Gaster concludes that the story of Esther is not a historical Purim, historical fact, and that the reason for associating it with the Feast of Purim could have been that the details of the feast were conveniently explained. He points out that the original form of the feast had these components: the selection of a new queen, corresponding to the selection of Esther, the parade of a commoner qua king, corresponding to the parade of Mordechai in the streets of Shushan, that shows up at Esther, whatever, verse 6-11, a fest corresponding to Esther's fest at 4:15-16, the execution of a felon corresponding to the hanging of a man, and the distribution of gifts. Furthermore, that festival must have taken place around the time of the vernal equinox, for it is then that Purim occurs. All of these aforementioned, that's a long word, conditions are satisfied if one assumes that the festival of Purim dates back to an earlier pagan New Year festival. Indeed, at New Year, it is customary in many parts of the world to appoint a new ruler in order to symbolize the renewal of communal life. Likewise, the installation of a commoner as temporary ruler between the end of one year and the commencement of another was quite commonplace. Ooh,
Okay. So this was all part of Babylonian New Year. A new queen, a commoner, being taken around like Mordecai as if he's a king, fast, giving of gifts. There's also a lot of drinking, a lot of humor. So it seems like it could be connected. Another thing, another theory also is Esther, the Jewish queen Esther, is the Jewish version of the Babylonian goddess Ishtar.
Right.
So they made her they made a Jewish girl the goddess Ishtar, Esther. And that Mordecai is the Jewish version of the god Marduk. So that they took those two names and they turned them into Jewish names in order to tell this story about
they made it like that to show you that there was a big assimilation within the Jewish population in Persia. They wanted to be like the Persians. There was a big assimilation. It took a big hit in the end to remind them that they're Jewish.
Yeah, however, there's something very satirical about saying, oh, your God is Esther. She's a nice Jewish girl. Your goddess, your God is Mordecai, a very smart, wise Jewish man who won't bow down to any idols. I mean, it's turning the pagan religion on its head in a way, and sort of, asserting Jewish humor. I mean, it's very, very humorous, you know what I mean, to do this. And I think we're going to look at the text. They make fun of the king right off the bat, as Penina mentioned, with the drunkenness and the incredible
count the drinking parties.
and they were drinking for 180 days, like 6 months nonstop. They're real shicker. They're really drunks. Okay, I just want to talk about one more part that I thought was really interesting. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. Hold on, where is it? Share. Because another theory, which I liked a lot, hold on, how do I go down? So this just goes on and on about that the scroll of Esther was written. Okay, this part, I think, and this repeats that central to the holiday is reading Esther, and some people think it's a fable. And this is similar to the Babylonian calendar. What I liked about it was some of the exiles must have joined the party and assimilated, which is what Penina says. They became Babylonian, wherever we live as Jews, we all sort of, find a way to connect the two cultures. If you're in Eastern Europe, you in Yiddish, it's German and Yiddish, and Ladino is Spanish, and German and Hebrew is Yiddish, and Ladino is Spanish and Hebrew. And there's actually a language called Arabi, which is Arabic in Hebrew. So we're always doing that. But this I really like. The exiles of the Jewish priests, the Kohanim, came up with a solution. They gave us a 2-day holiday in place of the 10-day carnival. They gave us Queen Esther, the human Queen Esther, instead of the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, and her uncle Mordecai instead of the Babylonian god Marduk. They commanded the people to drink themselves silly, but not pour libations to foreign gods. So you could get drunk, but you couldn't pour wine to the gods. Fornication remained a no-no. And we got those little cakes. Okay, well, you know this thing. Filled with poppy seeds or fruit preserves. This is a vulva-shaped cake. This is the triangle, the pubic triangle, the hamantashen. is the fertility goddess cake. If you think about it, it's the cake of the fertility. And I believe the cakes go back to further than Babylonian captivity to pagan times when the ancient Israelites worshipped the goddess Asherah. This is true. And there are even mentions of Asherah. They said God, Adonai, and his wife, Asherah. So this is an ancient pagan, early Israelite times. And Pnina has said this many times, that it was a process, that they were both, and then eventually they became monotheistic. I just want to finish
I
this.
just want to bring out another thing that we have to remember: the harem that the king had. We weren't very different when King Solomon had 1,000 wives.
You're right. We're going to look at that. They burned incense to her, danced in her sacred groves, and poured libations and baked cakes. In that same 6th century BCE, the prophet Jeremiah denounces women for pouring drink offerings to the Queen of Heaven and baking cakes in her image. The women retort that they and their husbands will continue to do so, just as their ancestors had. Okay, so that's the Hamantashen that we. Okay, so basically, what is this theory about Purim? That the Kohanim in the 6th century or 5th century, they Judified this Babylonian festival to make it a little more in control. And we know in Judaism, we have moderation. We're not completely extremely celibate or anti something. We try to have moderation. So they took this Babylonian festival, this is a theory, and not being 10 days, they made it 2 days. They turned the god and goddesses into Jews. They said, we're not pouring libations, but they did keep the cakes from the pagan times, which is the Hamantashen. But they said, oh, it's Haman's ear, it's Haman's hat. You know, they took out all the sexuality of it. And they included the idea of giving gifts, but they said we give gifts to the poor. So we have matanot le'avyonim during Purim. It's a custom to give gifts to the poor. And shalach manot, mishloch manot means we also, though, give cakes to our friends. So there's like, they contained it in a civilized way. And there was no sexual, fornication, because in many pagan cultures, sex was a way to connect with the god or the goddess. There were sacred prostitutes, male and female prostitutes, that you would go and you would have sex in the fields or at the temples, because this was a blending or a union with the god, with the holy. So the Kohanim said, no, none of that. But we're going to make it. And this is what they created as this holiday. And the text is even a deeper meaning. But I'm curious, what do you think about this possibility? Does it resonate with you? Do you like it? Does it disappoint you, disillusion you, amuse you, delight you? Pam, you're so quiet, but your hand's up.
So not my first thought, but one of my thoughts was when I was reading about how the early Israelites looked at this as a fertility rite. And if you think about just early spring rites, it's the time you plant, it's the time that you fertilize so that everyone can prosper and you create, and new babies get born in the animal kingdom, all that sort of thing, right? And so it seems to me that up until the Kohanim, the men, the priests, decided that they needed to get rid of goddess worship altogether, we had this right to Esther, who is our female goddess figure in a way, right? It's not the Shekinah, but that's the divine feminine spirit, but the actual goddess, if this is, I don't know, to me, it just seems like it's a normal rite of spring. So call it the new year, which used to be, April 1, even on our secular calendars. That's why we have April Fools. And I just think it's really evidence how far back Purim goes. However, it's been altered over the centuries and millennia.
Right.
You know
As
what I mean? Like
Yes.
this, the origin of it goes way, way, way back, and we have this influence and this influence, and this goes out and this comes, so to me, this is just another rite of spring.
And
Simplify.
Christmas is another example of that. Christmas
Yeah.
was,
it was honoring
Winter
the winter
solstice.
solstice.
Yeah, and the goddess and the god, and then the baby
And
was
the Christmas tree, because it is evergreen all through the winter, this miracle, right? So you adorn it, all of these things,
so it's similar, and yet it has significant meaning for millions, Christmas, and Purim has meaning for us on multiple levels that we'll talk about. Merle.
So I have a question. Going back to the jokes and the pranks and everything else. Years ago, I was told by a rabbi that that those who kept kosher, rabbis who kept kosher in the LA area, because of the prank concept and joke concept and everything else, that for Purim, for one day only, they gave up keeping kosher and they ate everything they weren't supposed to eat.
I never heard that.
I mean,
No.
I'm not going to say who it was.
No.
But it was,
so.
it's bothered me. I mean, I've never been into Purim. It's never been my favorite thing. I mean, I don't like the costume thing. I didn't like it. I don't like Halloween for the same reason.
Right.
But
No.
I mean, this has been something that I've been thinking about for this group of rabbis every year. When it was Purim, decided that that was their prank or joke or whatever.
They were going to go on a bacon eating fest. It was the bacon festival.
I don't think any rabbi who takes kashrut seriously would do that. However, and I'm going to call on Helen in 1 second, it's a mitzvah on Purim to get so drunk that you don't know the difference between Mordechai and Haman. And it's the one time a year that you can cross-dress. In other words, men can wear women's clothing and women can wear men's clothing. But eating treif, I've never heard that, and I highly doubt that. Helen.
Okay, thanks.
So coming from, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So coming from a more traditional than Reform background, I was really shocked. And I heard Rabbi Leader talk about eating treif on Purim.
You did?
Yeah, and I
have never heard that.
I couldn't get over it, but I understood the logic.
I'm going to have to check with him.
I
also come from a traditional background.
Yeah, ask him.
I can't imagine that you could eat treif on Purim. That is
okay. Now that she mentioned his name, the story came from Rabbi Donnell.
I'm going to look into this. I find this.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I just, okay, I'm wrong.
Not necessarily.
I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to see Steve tomorrow. I'm going to ask him about this because I don't know.
That doesn't seem possible, Susan.
It doesn't to me either, but I'm going to.
Because
I was shocked.
Is one of the most important things that the Jewish people do, and they're not going to just not follow the routine because they get one day where they can do it.
Honestly, it's interesting because I was raised kosher.
Me too.
And then in my 20s, I did taste, like lobster, or I never tasted pork, lobster, and I thought it was horrible. I mean, if you don't have a palate for that food, I don't know. Okay. But that aside, what do you think about this as a possible source of Purim? Susan?
Yes. Just quickly an aside, I would think it would only take a Reform rabbi to say that if he did. That's certainly not a conservative. And besides that, Purim is secondary to the laws of kashrut. It was added later. It has multiple interpretations, as you had given us. I think it was wonderful what you were providing there, and I get it with the blending of the cultures. But I should also say something about Esther. I don't see her as a goddess, with all due respect. And there's a wonderful essay by Meir Soloveichik in his book, of Jewish heroes in history. And he sees her as a reluctant participant initially. And she's not even saying that she was Jewish. Now, it was only to Mordecai stepped in and told her to do what she should do. And then she became a hero. And his book is, I think, it's Providence and Power, 10 heroes. And she was one of them, one of the 3 women in there, 3 out of the 10. So I would look at that as taking charge of your situation. But I love the melding that you brought in. And do you have any copies of this?
Yeah, I can email. I just didn't post it this week, but I have it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to send it to you.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful, she should be celebrated for her courage and her faith and a feeling of providence and the power that she took in her own hands to save the Jewish people. So
I agree. I think you're more heroic when you're reluctant and you're frightened and you say, I have to do it. Whatever, I've got to do it, but it's very frightening. So that is heroic.
You bought some physical therapy.
So, okay, somebody's like talking. Whoever's talking, Doris, just put your mute on. Doris, she's going. All right, whatever. Okay, anyone else want to comment on this? Pam.
Just a quick thought about the reluctant hero, which is that I don't know that has to be necessarily true, because like all of our hero stories sort of have that theme, right? I don't even know that Moses, my memory's not good.
He was reluctant as well. You're right.
All of our greatest heroes have that reluctance to it. So I think that's just part of the myth narrative. I don't know that how much reality or not. It's saying it's the layer we put on the story, and maybe all true heroes are reluctant. That's also a possibility. But I think it just goes with the story of the hero in general, that they're almost, I can't think of any that are like, yep, I'm going to go save the world. I think it's more like.
We do have them. Actually, they're women. Deborah, who goes to war with Barak, Yael, and Judith, who both kill when the men can't do it, they're the ones who kill the enemy. Yael takes a tent pin and drives it through Sisera, who's like the Hitler of the time's head. And Judith goes to Holofernes' tent. He's like the Babylonian or Syrian enemy, the general, and gets him drunk, and he falls asleep, and she cuts his head off and puts it in a bag and sends it. There's very famous art, as Susan will tell you, about Judith. She's holding a sword in one hand and his head in the other by his hair. You see this head? And actually, there are menorahs with that image with Judith or whatever that were made, a couple hundred years ago. But you're right. Moses was reluctant. A lot of the prophets were reluctant. But we'll look at Esther's character deeper, because I've never loved Esther. So I'm curious to go deep with you as well and see who she was or what we can figure out about her. So, okay, Penina, one last comment, then we're going to the text.
Okay. All right. So we have to see the location, first of all. You're trying to compare Esther to other women, but those women did it in Israel. Esther is in Persia right now. The location is very important because the rules that people had to follow were different. If you were in Persia, oh my God, somebody's making a lot of noise in my backyard. Anyhow, if you live in Persia and the king took out a law or a decree, he couldn't reverse his own conviction. Once it was out, he could only tell the Jews that they are allowed to defend themselves. He couldn't take away the law that he said, go out to the streets and kill all the Jews. That's what Haman wanted. So the fact that he couldn't reverse it, that was already a warning to the Jews that if you live in a country that the set of laws is different than yours and you are not independent there to follow your own laws, which should be just according to the Ten Commandments with how do you call it, witnesses and blah, blah, blah. It's a different story. And then when he couldn't reverse the law, his own
Okay,
law,
but what does it have
he
to do with
gave them
Esther?
permission to defend
But
themselves.
what does it have to do with Esther?
It has to do in Esther because she had to actually plead into a justice that wasn't in her frame of
Okay.
life.
All right, let's look at
She
this
goes
now.
she has to go to the king to ask the king to reverse his own law, and he couldn't do it according to the Persian law. So
right,
what
let's
happens
look
is
at
that he
this.
gave the Jews the permission to defend themselves. So God help us if we live in a country that we need a permission to defend ourselves. That's what the story is telling you.
All right, I think that's
That's
good.
what the story of Esther is telling you.
All right,
That's it.
let's look at the text.
Okay.
Here it is. This is the whole book. We're just going to start it, and we're going to start looking at it. And I'm just going to read the first sentence so you can explain something. And it came to pass in the days of Achashverosh, the same Achashverosh who ruled from Hodu to Kush, 127 provinces. So Hodu is India, and Kush is Ethiopia. So this is what the Persian Empire, how huge the Persian Empire was at this during this story, this tale. And they were that big. I just watched a really interesting miniseries on Netflix about Alexander the Great. And his it's amazing that he was able to conquer the Persians because it is a huge, enormous, and very cultural was a cultural civilization, and really from India to Ethiopia, think how much of the world they ruled. And okay, so this is Ahasuerus. Okay, so just wanted to give you what Hodu and Kush was. So Susan Ehrlich, why don't you read from 2?
So in those days, when Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne, which was in Shushan, the capital, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all ministers and servants, the army of Persia and Media, the nobles, and all the ministers of the provinces in the service. For many days, 180 days, he displayed the glorious wealth of his kingdom and the splendorous beauty of his majesty.
Okay, 180 days. That is 6 months. That is a long time to have a party.
That's like almost, it's 2/3 of gestation. So
that's funny. Right. So he made a feast in his 3rd year for everyone and the army and the nobles and the ministers. This was a huge party. And for 180 days, they were celebrating. Okay, a little more.
Okay, and so when these days came to an end, the king made a 7-day feast in the courtyard of the king's palace garden for all the people in Shushan, the capital, noblemen and commoner alike.
So 6 months he had a party for nobility. Now he had another party, a 7-day party for all the people and in his palace garden. Okay, how big must this palace garden courtyard have been?
Really, yeah, literally
city,
large.
If the whole city could fit into it. Okay, and what did it look like?
Yeah, there were hangings of
more.
white, green, and blue held by cords of linen and purple wool of silver rods and marble pillars. There were divans of gold and silver on a floor of alabaster and marble, arranged in patterns of rows and circles. So drinks were served in golden vessels of assorted design, and the royal wine was in abundance as befitting the king. The drinking was by the law, without force, for so had the king ordered all the stewards of his household to comply with the will of each man.
Okay, so just from this, first of all, I mean, I'm reading this now, and I have to say I haven't read the Megillah in detail in a long time. This is obviously written by someone who knows what it looks like or what the palaces were like. The detail is, the colors, the detail is so specific that it had to be someone who'd seen this, who or knew about it. I mean, we've barely seen inside Buckingham Palace. You know, we've seen it in movies. I mean, I actually did take a tour in there, but only in certain rooms. But this is someone who has been there and or heard about it, or in some way knew that there were the hangings, the colors, the vessels. And what do you think this means? The drinking was by the law without force. So what was the law then? What does it mean, do you think?
Well, with force is that you're forcing someone to drink. But by the law, I don't know whether it was, you can only go to a certain limit, or whether you had to go to that limit, but not force it. So I think that's a little unclear.
Well, it says to comply with the will of each man. In other words, you could drink until you had your fill, but nobody could force you to drink more,
Right.
is my impression.
Right,
You
I
know,
think that too, but I don't know what the law.
Serve them as much as they want, but don't force them. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's this,
Sounds like it's a custom thing.
right. Okay.
I
Now,
think that used to be back in the day that if the king was drinking, you had to drink. If the king didn't was sitting, you had to be sitting. If the king stood, then you could stand. Like there was such a thing. The astronomer Tycho Brahe, that I remember this from astronomy class when I was like 19. But he actually died because his bladder burst because he was at some festival with the king and he couldn't get up to go to the bathroom. And his bladder literally burst because he couldn't get up to go because the king didn't go.
I understand.
So this might have something to do with one of those kind of rules.
I think you're right, because I think there's protocol in Buckingham Palace with the Queen. You can't eat until the Queen starts, and when she stops, you have to stop.
Right.
So maybe also it's when if he drinks, you have to not today, but years ago, or ancient Persian, you had to drink when the king drank, and you had to. So he said, by this one, you could just do as much as you want. So I guess that was a rarity because they mention it. It was a rarity. So, okay, now here's the Vashti thing that let's look at what it actually says. Who has not read? Because I can't see everyone. Oh, Pam, go ahead. This is perfect for you.
Hold on a second. Let me get this bigger so I can see it. Oh, why is this not going?
Queen Vashti 2.
Hold on one second. I just have to make it bigger on my screen.
Okay.
Queen Vashti II made a feast for the women in the royal palace of King. Okay.
Ahasuerus.
Thank you. Ahasuerus. On the seventh day, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he ordered these people. And
okay, so these people were the seven chamberlains: Mehuman, Bezetta, Charvona, Bigta, Avagta, Zetar, and Farkas. I wonder, actually, I don't know if these were real names or comical names or actual names. I mean, they weren't the real names of, because Ahasuerus isn't a real name of a real king either. It was maybe Cyrus the Great or whatever. But I wonder if these, because Ahasuerus is kind of a ridiculous name, if you think about it. You know, it's not a Persian name. Maybe these were ridiculous names too. Continue, Pam.
Okay, so the king's heart was merry with wine. He ordered the seven chamberlains who attended him to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing the royal crown to show her beauty to the nations and ministers, for she was indeed beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to appear by the king's order brought by the chamberlains, and the king grew furious and his wrath seized within him.
Okay, so I have always heard, but I don't see it, and I wonder if you see it, that she was supposed to come naked.
That's what I heard.
I always heard she was supposed to come before wearing the royal crown to show her beauty to the nations and the ministers, for she was indeed beautiful. Was it her physical beauty? I also heard that she was supposed to dance. I've heard all these things, but I'm looking at the actual text, and he just wanted her to come. So why would that be? Why would she refuse? Why? What about this must have been humiliating or insulting to her, do you think?
Well, because they were all a bunch of his drunk buddies, basically.
Right.
I mean, but the interesting thing about these names, just by the way,
Right.
Sharkas is like chakra, the Indian word for the energy
Right.
centers, right? And there are 7 of them. So that's sort of interesting. And Vashti, it reminds me of the god, the Vashti.
Vishnu.
But there's also a sage called there's poses Vashistasana. And in Vashistasana, it's side plank. So you're sort of displaying yourself on your side, almost like you're on a divan or something like that.
Oh, that's
So it's
interesting.
interesting that the name Vashti, and because this kingdom ranges into India, into Ethiopia, all of these pagan gods probably also got mixed up in all the names of peoples and things. So anyway, just a
It's
little.
interesting. It'd be interesting to do like a study and see if these names reflect things from different cultures, different gods from different pagan civilizations under the Persian Empire.
One of the things I think about is that, like, how I work in Latin music. So if I run into someone who happens to be Jewish from Mexico or Argentina or whatever, they'll be like Jose Cohen, and things that you wouldn't sort of our American ears don't expect to hear. Steve Cohen, yes. Jose, not so much. And I think it just reflects, as we have seen so often in all of these things over the millennia, the assimilation, right? So we're taking a little bit from here, we bring the name in, we have this. So anyway, that's just that's
I like that idea. But so what do we think was insulting to her? Women were kept separate. They were, modest. There was a whole idea of modesty to bring her to parade her beauty in front of all of these people. I guess.
Well, it objectifies her, right? It objectifies her.
Helen.
Well, what if she was insulted by being ordered to appear? Why not be asked or requested to appear?
Well, he's the king. He's the king, but yeah, I think, but I'm wondering, how drunk men are. It's like, oh my God, catcalling and wooing and ogling and I don't know. And the king is saying the thing that I do agree with you, Helen, in a way is it's like he's saying, look at what I own. This is my property. Here's my gold and here's my this and here's my that and here's my wife. She's my property. Something about it, because we learn later that Esther, to come before the king is very, this king is supposed to be scary, to disobey the king, though he doesn't seem that bright as story goes on. But anyway, it's all implied, or maybe in the ancient world, people would understand the insult that we don't understand today. Maybe to say, oh my God, to bring your wife, the queen. Really, let's think about it even today. If Prince William was drunk and had been drinking for 6 months, flushed out of his mind, and he called his wife, now you got to see Kate. We would all like to see Kate right now because we haven't seen. But anyway, come on, Kate, put on a crown and come on in here and say hello. I don't know that she would do it. She would say, forget it. You know what I mean? You're all drunk out of your minds. I'm not going. And dress up and look gorgeous because I want to show you off. Even today, if you think about it in that context, it's very insulting and demeaning. And good for Vashti, or not so good as we find out, but good for Vashti. She said, no, I'm not coming. So you can't treat me like that. So it's interesting. This is our first strong woman. Merle, do you have your hand up? Merle,
yeah, I was going to say basically this is in any age to be ordered by a bunch of drunk people, especially if it's supposedly
not drunk people, drunk men.
Drunk men, to be ordered to do this, no matter who you are, it's got to be embarrassing or humiliating. The other thing is when Pam was reading, she talked about Vashti on her divan. So if you look up, if you Google Vashti, that's the first picture that shows up, is her lying in this fancy costume. I can't make the picture big enough to show it, but if you Google her, it will show her. One picture of her is a very nice picture, just like sitting on the side of a bed. The other picture is like her lying on this divan with all this stuff around her.
Oh, that's interesting. Right. So she envisioned her. Susan, and then Miriam.
Oh, I think this is all wonderful, and I agree with you. I mean, you don't have to be naked. I mean, that's the ultimate in humiliation, but you don't have to be naked to come before a bunch. I mean, look how many were there of drunk people. But he didn't invite her to give a State of the Union message. You know, I mean, he didn't invite her to do something that was professional. He invited her to show off her beauty. And I mean, that's before the drunks on top of it. And I think that's the ultimate, I mean, that's really humiliating. Even if you're queen by the choice of this king. And if you disobey, you can be banished or we don't know what happened to
He was
Vashti.
treating her like a common whore, not his queen.
Yes.
That's what it is. He was treating her like a common whore as opposed to his queen. That's what I think.
I think you're right. That's a
And
good point.
That's true,
Okay.
but just as a human being as well. I mean,
Right.
Can I
But
say
women weren't,
something?
Susan, 2,500 years ago, women weren't human beings. They were property. They belonged to their fathers and to their husbands to do as they would. And daughters, were just also property. So, I mean, but I think Pam is onto something. She wasn't being treated like a queen. She was being treated like a common dancing girl, a common whore, or whatever. And she was like, who do you call out, when you're in the tavern, in the bar, or you're drunk in the
Right.
garden?
Even among the ranks of women, he wasn't treating her as her status.
That's correct.
That's the
Exactly.
thing. It's not about the male-female part of it. It's even in the ranks of women, he wasn't treating her as her highest status that she is.
I think that's really
what I think would be the issue.
I think you're right. Okay, Miriam.
I've read the Purim story, as perhaps you all have, and I've read it directly from the Bible several times. And now, at this very late stage of my life, as you all know, I'm 97. I'm blessed, very blessed by God.
We're blessed to have you.
I always thank her. And but isn't it interesting that we have this wonderful conversation and people convince themselves more and more why she did not come. But this particular passage was written so cleverly, so insightfully, that not one hint was given to why she did not come. So we are all conjecturing.
You're right.
We are all surmising. Some of us are convinced, as it was, I think one of the rabbis actually wrote that because he wanted her naked. And where did this come from? Nowhere in the Purim story.
Exactly.
And that's why I think it's a wonderful story all over again. And every year I admire it for so many reasons, especially at the end. It says, you must give presents to the poor. That's to me such a huge message of this story. It's lost to us and we need to repeat. But thank you for the opportunity, Susan, that you gave me this morning to give new thoughts to it. Because you always do that, Susan. You stimulate people, and we thank you. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. I just want to get to the end of the Vashti part. Wait, oops, I didn't do it right. Hold on. I didn't say share. And then, okay. Who has not read? Tell me. Okay, so she refused. Okay, so this is unbelievable. The logic about why they want to get rid of Vashti. Okay, who's there? Somebody who hasn't read.
I'll volunteer.
Miriam? Okay,
Yeah, I haven't read.
okay.
So the king conferred with the wise men. Is that what I'm reading? Those
Yeah,
knowledgeable. So the king conferred with the wise men, those knowledgeable of the times, for this was the king's custom to bring such matters before those who were versed in every law and statute. Those closest to him were all those fellows.
right.
These were the 7 ministers of Persia and Media who had access to the king and ranked highest in the kingdom. He asked them, by law, what should be done with Queen Vashti for failing to obey the order of King Ahasuerus brought by the chamberlains. Memucham declared before the king and the ministers, it is not against the king alone that Queen Vashti.
All right, hold on. Let me just get rid of it. I don't even know where my phone is. Oh, here. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
For the ministers, it is not against the king alone that Queen Vashti has sinned, but against all the ministers and all the nations and all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For word of the queen's deed will reach all the women, and it will belittle their husbands in their eyes. For they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded that Queen Vashti be brought before him, yet she did not come. This very day, the noble women of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's deed, will repeat it to all the king's nobles, and there will be much disgrace and anger.
Okay, so basically they're saying, well, oh my God, if the queen doesn't have to obey her husband, what about all our wives? They'll look at the queen and say, she didn't listen to her husband. They don't have to listen to us. So this is their big concern. Oh my goodness, what will our wives, what will the wives of everyone else do if you don't punish this woman? Because what an example she's setting. Rebellion among the ranks of the wives. Yes, Penina.
Okay. I am looking at the vowels on the word Vashti.
Yes,
And
okay.
if you read it, if you put different vowels on it, it's
Yeah.
Vashti. It's come and drink.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Vishti.
If you don't have vowels, you can
Right.
read it Vashti and drink. So in other words, when he calls her,
He's saying,
and
come and drink.
it's come and be like one of, like, either entertain my people and behave like not like a queen.
Right, exactly. Be a barmaid.
A drunken nothing in front of
Exactly.
everybody.
So this is where we're going to stop for now, but we're going to be going deeper into this. But here's this idea that the men, this is their advice. You have to punish her because otherwise our wives will start to rebel and not listen to us. And that is the reason, that's the reason you have to get rid of her. It's not like she broke any law, not like, oh, it's a law, it's against the law that she insulted you or she did something to the king. No. How is it going to affect us? So there's this self-interest here about keeping their women in line. So we're going to stop here and continue this. We'll read it, and it's very interesting to read together and go deep into it. So it's great. And don't forget to sign up for our amazing Purim party on March 23rd at the temple. It's a disco. We have a real DJ. We're having a mirror ball. We're having lights. There's a Megillah reading beforehand from 6:30 to 7. It's called a happy hour Megillah, where you come and drink and hear excerpts of the Megillah. And then there's like food and drink and dance. It's going to be beautiful. So I hope you'll come to that. And Bonnie, we're sending you our love and refuah shlema. It's so nice to see you. We hope,
Thank you. I'm doing better. I'm lucky to be
I know
alive.
you are. I know you are.
I am blessed.
Happy you're doing better.
Right.
I'm doing better. I won the lottery.
Yes, you did. Everybody have a great week. And I
You
will see you
too.
soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Shabbat shalom. I mean,
Shalom.
not yet. It's Wednesday.
It's okay.
You can start.
Close.
I can stop. Shavua tov. Anyhow, rest of the week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.